Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. If you are here right now, it's because you are getting ready to watch President Biden's Oval Office address. Just to be sure about all of this, he's only done 3 Oval Office addresses during his entire presidency, so generally reserves them for pretty important moments. So we should expect some major announcement. I mean, this is all following in the immediate aftermath of Biden's decision not to run for re-election. So already unto itself, a pretty historic moment that we're in. So this is going to be starting in less than an hour here. In the meantime, I thought I would take the opportunity to answer some questions that everybody has. Obviously, a lot happening in politics right now between Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden dropping out. So let's take a few minutes, and if you have questions and you want to throw them in the chat, that would be a great way to get me to answer them. All you have to do is tag my name and head over to the chat. If you want to be able to write questions in the chat, please make sure to subscribe. The chat is subscribers only. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, and this way I can be able to answer your questions. I am seeing a request to bring the mic volume up, which I can absolutely do. So let's just make it a little... Okay, mic volume should be a little bit louder now. By the way, for anybody who has tuned into my streams before, I believe you'll notice that the stream is a little higher quality definition right now. So we did like a big upgrade in the last day. Okay, so this is the question I expected. Who are we looking at for vice president? The question that I got is Mark Kelly or Josh Shapiro. So let's discuss, and then I'm getting a raft of other questions, Tim Waltz. So let's discuss what we are looking at in terms of vice presidential options here. So different candidates confer different electoral benefits to Kamala Harris. Obviously, at the top of the list is probably Mark Kelly and Josh Shapiro in terms of the electoral benefits that they confer. Josh Shapiro comes from the absolutely crucial swing state of Pennsylvania. He's young, he's articulate, charismatic. His whole motto is "Get shit done," which is a pretty good motto if you're trying to prove to the American people that it's worth it to elect you. Then you've got someone like Mark Kelly, obviously comes from another crucial swing state in Arizona, and in terms of electability for that guy, he not only got elected as a Democrat in the state of Arizona, which is tough, even though Democrats have had success in the last few years, owed not in small part to the extremism of the Republicans who've run, but also, dude's an astronaut. And so it's a little tough to run against an astronaut. There are not many of them, and it's generally a good sales pitch if you're looking for somebody to elect. Of course, then from there, we're looking at options that include Pete Buttigieg, who is just an absolute killer when it comes to rhetoric and what he can do on TV. He's probably one of 2 people who I would really trust to be able to go on Fox News and just shut them down completely. The other one being, of course, Gavin Newsom. Then we're looking at J.B. Pritzker. We're looking at Tim Waltz. We're looking at Gretchen Whitmer, popular governor of Michigan, another crucial swing state. So I don't know who she's going to pick, obviously. I have no idea. I don't know which way she's leaning, but I would imagine that a big consideration in terms of the VP selection is going to be what electoral benefits she can get. And I'm looking at certain states in particular, and that is Pennsylvania and Arizona right off the bat. There also is, a big part of me that just looks at someone like Pete, who's been brutally effective at his job. And all of which is to say, there is a deep bench of Democrats to choose from, which for the first time in memory that I can actually point to this, because, even before Obama came onto the scene, it was like it was thin out there, like there wasn't a deep bench for Democrats. And thank God Obama did come onto the scene, but he was largely unknown. Before that, it was just like the old school establishment Democrats. And now we have people like, with Obama initially in 2008, and then this whole deep bench of Democrats from Kamala to Pete, Gavin, Tim Walz, J.B. Pritzker, Wes Moore, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly. I mean, there is a whole deep bench of very capable Democrats, and I would be completely fine and enthusiastic about all of them. So I don't know what she's going to do. It would be very interesting to hear what everybody here thinks in terms of who she's going to choose. So what I'm going to do, let's get a little interactive here. I'm going to start a poll and ask who you think the VP selection will be, because to be honest, your guess is as good as mine. So let's include Pete Buttigieg, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, and let's see, Andy Bashir. His name has been floating around quite a bit. So let's just do this poll for now, and we can do a bit of a ranked choice voting situation where, as they continue to whittle people down, we can start new polls and see what everybody thinks. I'm seeing the name Jon Stewart as well. While I would love for Jon Stewart to be the next vice president, I've learned to lower the expectations somewhat. We can't have everything that we want. Okay, here's an interesting question. If given the opportunity, would the Republicans consider changing candidates now? My honest opinion, they don't have the opportunity. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have both been formally nominated. The conventions are over. It's a done deal for Republicans. Obviously, the Democratic convention isn't starting until August 19th. If you'd asked me, would the Republicans consider changing candidates if they could, I would say their VP candidate, yeah. I think when Donald Trump went with J.D. Vance, he did it out of straight cockiness. And here's what I mean. He could have chosen somebody, if he felt like this election was going to be rough for him, he could have chosen somebody who would bring other electoral benefits for him. Maybe somebody who was moderate, like Mike Pence was. And that kind of gave a permission structure for evangelical voters to come on board. They see somebody like Donald Trump, he has this playboy aura about him. And so they were a little skittish. And so you have someone like Mike Pence who's basically a nod to the evangelical community, gives them a permission structure to come home, vote for the Republican ticket. What he did with J.D. Vance is he chose somebody who wasn't from a swing state, who wasn't a different race, religion, who wasn't a moderate, for example. He chose a carbon copy of the thing he loves most in the world, which is Donald J. Trump. And by doing that, he basically said, I don't need any help. I don't need to do anything to expand my coalition. I'm not making a play for other voters. And I'm just gonna give the American people what I think they want, which is just more me. It's just a carbon copy of Trump, and this he does in his interminable, deep in the throes of his own ego. So he brings forward J.D. Vance because he's just that confident that he's going to beat Joe Biden. When it turns out that Joe Biden isn't the nominee because the convention hasn't happened yet, and he's still able to transfer his war chest over to Kamala Harris. We'll talk about that in a moment, because there is some litigation pending regarding that whole raft of over $100 million. So he basically said, I'm just gonna do that. And what we're left with now, once he had Kamala Harris step in instead of Joe Biden is that now all of a sudden a bunch of states that wouldn't have been in play because Joe Biden was having difficulty polling, and even safe blue states like New Mexico, for example, and Virginia were going to be up for grabs. Now all of a sudden he does need the help. And so you have basically a double Trump on the ticket with Trump and J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance actually worse polling than Donald Trump because Donald Trump won Ohio in 2020 by a larger margin than J.D. Vance won his Senate race in Ohio in 2022. J.D. Vance is a drag on the ticket. He won his seat in Ohio by a worse margin than Donald Trump and a worse margin than DeWine, the Republican governor there. So the guy is a drag on the ticket. He brings nothing. Even in his home state, he's a drag on the ticket. And so now you have someone like Kamala who not only under herself is going to be able to prosecute this case way more effectively than Donald Trump would be able to against Joe Biden. I mean, this is prosecutor versus felon, somebody who has crisscrossed the country in the last year advocating for abortion rights while Donald Trump is bragging about stripping them away in light of a bunch of Americans moving away from the Republican Party on this issue. So not only is Kamala herself going to be able to prosecute this case way more effectively than Joe Biden would have, and does she pose brand new issues for Donald Trump, but her VP pick now, whoever it may be, whether it's, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, Andy Beshear, Pete Buttigieg, whoever it may be, those people are going to be able to bring electoral benefits too, because all of a sudden, if you pick the governor of Pennsylvania, well, now Pennsylvania is even more in play than it would have been just if you had Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. All of a sudden, if you pick Mark Kelly, then Arizona is going to be in play way more than it would have been just if it was Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. So he kind of got doubly screwed here. Not that I feel bad for him for getting screwed, but got doubly screwed here in the sense that not only does Kamala herself pose a major risk to Donald Trump's cockiness here, his ability to win, but now she has the opportunity to fill the ticket with somebody who's going to make life even more difficult for Donald Trump moving forward. Whether it's whether it is one of these people, whether it's Pete or Josh or Mark Kelly, Andy Beshear, Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore, the list goes on and on. Like I said before, we have a deep bench. Just looking at, let's see, let me just grab another question again. If and when Trump loses, does he run again, or does he abandon campaigning and run the party from Truth Social? That is a great question. I cannot imagine a world in which, look, do I think that Trump would back down if left to his own devices? No. He's still pretending that he won the 2020 election. He's still carrying on with this whole bullshit farce 4 years later. So do I think Donald Trump will give up? Absolutely not. But the party is going to have to make a decision. Is their blind fealty to the God King, to the cult leader, more important than ever actually securing power again, is going to be the question. And I don't know the answer to that, honestly. It seems like a ridiculous question because they can either just, grovel at the feet of a guy who's lost them elections in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2023, and now 2024 for no other reason. It's not like he can confer some massive electoral benefit for them. Quite the opposite. He's going to be responsible for loss after loss after loss after loss after loss. But they may very well do that because, he does control some faction of the base. The problem is it's not enough people to actually matter in a general election, but maybe just holding control of the minority in the federal government and a bunch of state legislatures so that they can be, the leaders of the MAGA resistance is enough for them. Maybe they just want these little enclaves in Florida and Texas where they can just, continue to. It really would be the best of both worlds for them because they wouldn't actually have to govern, which is great because they don't want to govern, and they can continue building their brands as members of the opposition to the Democrats, and then they can just go off and rail against coffee cups at Starbucks and water pressure and Hannibal Lecter and all of their other favorite things. So it could be a win-win because there is a part of me that thinks that Republicans don't actually want to be in the majority. They like to complain. Their whole identity is predicated in victimhood. And so being in the majority doesn't allow them to complain because they're the ones that actually get to wield power. But being in the minority allows them to blame everything on the Democrats. The problem is also that while they're blaming everything on the Democrats, it doesn't take much to be able to look what Democrats have actually accomplished when they're in power. I mean, in just in just 2 years when Democrats had full control of government, if you've watched my videos, you've heard me do this list, but the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the PACT Act, the Violence Against Women Act, the Infrastructure Law, the Gun Safety Law, codified marriage equality into federal law, added 16 million jobs, brought the unemployment rate down to a 50-year low for the longest stretch in half a century. We have inflation down, wages are outpacing inflation. So on metric after metric after metric, Democrats actually deliver when they're in the majority. And that's great because Democrats want to govern. Republicans want to complain about the Democrats from the minority where they don't actually have to wield any power. And so everybody wins. So to answer that question, do I think that they're going to give up if and when Donald Trump loses and finally abandon Donald Trump? Your guess is as good as mine, because it's a matter of whether they actually want to govern, in which case they would, or if they just want to continue bilking their base for donations and to buy their books and their shoes and their NFTs and their trading cards and whatever other products they can hawk at them. So that's the answer to that question. I'm selling plasma and donating every penny to the Harris campaign. My blood is in this now. Sweat to come and hopefully no tears. More power to you. That is the ultimate commitment. That is the ultimate commitment. I feel like my commitment to all of this has been that I don't think I've seen the sun in 4 days now since all of this has gone down. I get the comment, what Trump will do if he loses will be whatever the prison allows him to do. That's a great point. There is the fact that waiting on the other side of this thing are 3 more indictments. Of course, we have the classified documents case in Florida that was dismissed. That's going to be appealed up to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. We have the D.C. case, which we're pending a decision on whether or not the immunity decision plays into that case, has any impact on that case, and whether Judge Chutkan can actually take that into effect or not. And finally, we have the Georgia RICO prosecution. So there is still 3 cases that are pending. And don't forget, we have sentencing coming up in New York, I believe in the beginning of September. And so maybe that sentence will be delayed. Maybe he'll have to serve out some portion of it. I don't know what's going to happen in the sentencing, but all of which is to say, it's not smooth sailing from here on out. So we'll see what happens on that front, but he does have a lot of legal issues waiting for him on the other side of this. The flip side is, if you want to see Donald Trump face any form of accountability, face any form of justice, it's going to rely solely on our ability to make sure that he doesn't get into the Oval Office, because if he does, then he's going to be able to pretty easily, in my opinion, make sure that he doesn't face any accountability on those cases. I mean, he'll just use his own DOJ he'll just withdraw his own DOJ basically from the prosecutions of him. I'm pro-Trump, but I will say how I respect how professional and calm you are when discussing politics. I appreciate that. Swing state question. Does having a Democrat as governor in the majority of all the swing states have a major impact for Kamala, assuming it does? Does having a Democrat as governor in the majority of all the swing states? Sorry, I just want to make sure that I understand the question. Yeah, well, okay. In terms of the impact that swing state governors, it's not necessarily a majority of whether the governor is. It's not going to have much of an impact other than just right now we can recognize the importance that the states have on all issues where the federal government doesn't have any control over them. So abortion rights, for example, the federal government right now, without some type of, codified protection for abortion rights, it's completely up to the states. That has massive implications for abortion rights and reproductive rights. So, on these issues in particular, on fair maps, for example, which is an issue that I talk about a lot, again, major implications here in terms of whether the governor is a Democrat or Republican. So yes, I think having Democrats as governors in these swing states is going to be majorly impactful, both right now and if and when Kamala does win the next election. Can Joe Biden direct that term limits be implemented for the Supreme Court given his immunity? So the immunity relies on the immunity is dependent upon criminal acts that a president commits in office. But a president isn't allowed to just unilaterally pass laws. He can, which is the most bizarre thing, right? I'm basically saying here, a president could have someone assassinated, but he can't unilaterally pass laws. That would be a bridge too far. So no, it would still require congressional approval and legislation to actually implement some type of term limit for the Supreme Court. The broader picture here is that Joe Biden wouldn't do that, and he won't do that. He won't abuse any powers that he has. There is that asymmetry at play where the only way that this immunity decision really comes into effect, really comes into play here, is if Donald Trump or a Republican get into office. And that's that asymmetry at play, because if you have a Democrat, they're not going to break the law. You're not going to have somebody like Joe Biden who's going to come forward and have his political opponent assassinated. But if I asked everybody here how likely you think it is that Donald Trump would have a political opponent assassinated, or if he would try to get the IRS to, use the IRS, for example, or the FBI or the DOJ to retaliate against political opponents, I'll bet a pretty good number of you in here would guess that he would. So that's the asymmetry. Basically, when the Supreme Court hands down these vast powers to the executive branch, they're only handing it down for Republicans to use because they know full well, we all know full well, that Democrats aren't going to avail themselves of those powers. Wouldn't it be best that the vice president pick is not a sitting senator due to the risk of a Republican winning the special election, especially in Arizona? That's a great point. I mean, the downside, the upside to choosing someone like Mark Kelly, for example, who can win in Arizona, is that Mark Kelly did win in Arizona, and he would have to vacate his seat in Arizona if he were chosen as vice president. Not an easy seat to win. So, yeah, I mean, that is definitely something to think about. I think if we look at which states would be the easiest to have somebody step out of that seat and join the ticket, then I think if you're going between Mark Kelly and Josh Shapiro, just in terms of these two swing state governors, that is where Josh Shapiro is a little bit more attractive, because I think it's going to be easier to replace a Democrat as governor in Pennsylvania than it is to replace a Democrat in the U.S. Senate in a state like Arizona. Also, you look at somebody like Pete, for example, where he wouldn't have to vacate any seat. So a lot of things to think about here. There's no obvious choice, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So with that said, let's take a look right now at the poll. It looks like it's kind of a runaway result here. We have Pete Buttigieg at 40%, Josh Shapiro at 19%, Mark Kelly at 30%, Andy Beshear at 10%. So what I'm going to do is we'll do a little ranked choice voting situation. I'm going to whittle it down now, and I'm going to take Andy Beshear, who is the lowest polling candidate, out, and I'm going to add in Pete, Shapiro, and Mark Kelly. So let's do a new poll. We'll title it VP Pick, and we'll do Pete Buttigieg, Mark Kelly, Josh Shapiro. And if you haven't yet voted, head over to the comments and make sure to vote. If you want to participate in the chat at all you have to do is subscribe to this channel. About half of you watching right now are not yet subscribed, so if you want to support the work that I do, the best way to do that is there's two ways. The best is to subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. It's just a great way to see these live streams and to stay on top of my coverage throughout the entire day. I only post a few videos a day, so I promise you won't be bombarded. And the second is I actually just wrote a book, and it's being released in a couple of weeks here. The foreword was written by Jamie Raskin. It includes interviews with Pete Buttigieg, Heather Cox Richardson, Al Franken, Mark Elias, Jen Psaki, and Dan Pfeiffer. Really proud of the book. It's called Shameless. So I will link it in the comment section right now, or you can just head over to your favorite bookseller, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org is an indie bookseller, and pre-order it there. That's a great way to support what I do, and I would very, very, very much appreciate that. So I will pin that in the comments right now. So if you haven't yet pre-ordered Shameless, I would very much appreciate if you could do that. That's a great way to support me. So Piers Morgan saying that So I was just, okay, let's read the next question. Piers Morgan saying Trump to Hitler is bad is disingenuous. No one is saying they're identical, but some things Trump's done are like what Hitler did. That's not violent or unreasonable, and I'm a conservative. So that's a question I just got. Some context around that question is I was on Piers Morgan's show this morning. Piers basically said, why wasn't Kamala Harris, on the issue of unity, why didn't Kamala Harris come out and basically call for unity in the wake of Donald Trump's shooting? And my response to Piers was, why is the onus always on Democrats to be the adults in the room? So Donald Trump ramps up the rhetoric in this country for 8 years, says that Paul Pelosi getting bludgeoned with a hammer, laughs that off, says that if there's a protester at his rally, asked for his supporters to beat them up and then he would pay for their legal bills, reposted an image of Joe Biden hogtied in the back of a truck, reposted another image of a baseball bat next to Alvin Bragg, called for Liz Cheney to be tried in a military tribunal, said something about the Second Amendment and advocated for gun use in the Second Amendment, incited the insurrection on January 6th and predicated in large part his re-election campaign on freeing what he calls the hostages. He does all of that, and yet all of a sudden, the onus is on the Democrats to tamp down the rhetoric. The onus is on the Democrats to bring the country together. If nothing else, this is just a testament to the extent to which the Republicans in this country are graded on a curve. The media will allow them to act like children, to get people killed or hurt, including Donald Trump nearly getting assassinated himself as the result of the rhetoric that he himself brought in this country, and yet immediately, without question, nobody points to all of those examples I just gave and called for the Republicans to tamp down the rhetoric. Best case scenario, it's both sides need to tamp down the rhetoric. Worst case scenario, like what happened today when I was on Piers Morgan's show, is why didn't Kamala come out and call for unity to tamp down the rhetoric? As if it's always on us to only and always be the adults in the room. And then Piers Morgan says, well, rhetoric's Democrats have referred to Trump as akin to Hitler, and isn't that tamping up the rhetoric in this country anyway? And my response to him was, look, it is not the Democrats' fault that Donald Trump is called a fascist when Donald Trump acts like a fascist. We're not the ones who told him to terminate the Constitution, to say that he's going to terminate the Constitution, to say that he wants to send the military into American cities, to say that he wants to start mass deportations, to say that he wants to be a dictator on day one. If Donald Trump is going to act like a fascist, people are going to call him a fascist. And also, what is this fascist apologia where you can act like a fascist, but unless you do what Hitler did, which is the extreme, then you're not a fascist all of a sudden? So we can't call Donald Trump a fascist unless the Holocaust, unless he incites the Holocaust. But otherwise, and if he doesn't do that, then you aren't allowed to call him a fascist. There's apparently that's the only bar for fascism, which of course is all nonsense. And it's all underscored by the fact that, I never called Donald Trump, I never likened Donald Trump to Hitler, but you know who has? J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's own vice presidential pick. So if Piers Morgan or any of these conservatives have any issue with the rhetoric in this country, or especially as it relates to drawing similarities between Donald Trump and Hitler, he might want to just ask that question to Trump's own VP pick, J.D. Vance. So I'm getting the question, have I noticed any differences in my analytics that suggest more enthusiasm for Democrats? So 3 days ago was the most viewed day I've ever had on this channel. And I've been on YouTube for, I think, about 6 years now. So 3 days ago, most viewed day on the channel. 2 days ago became the new most viewed day on my channel. Yesterday was the new most viewed day on my channel. In the entirety of the last 6 years, the 3 most watched days are the last 3 days. So I think there is a degree of enthusiasm among Democrats that I have never seen before. That's also bearing itself out in the number of donations that are coming in. Let's see, I just pulled up a story moments ago. As of Tuesday evening, so last night, Kamala Harris's team has raised $126 million. And especially interesting, 896,000 donors who were making their first donations of the cycle. So nearly 1 million donors, all of whom this was the first time they'd opened up their wallets. That is a huge number. These were voters who, by virtue of the fact that they hadn't donated a penny before in this cycle, were just completely disaffected in this cycle. Hadn't donated a single dollar. And it doesn't mean that we weren't still facing Donald Trump, because we were. I mean, the threats that we were facing were abundantly clear, but it was just a result of just how dampened the support was, dampened the enthusiasm rather was, as we were heading toward November. Now, between the money that's being spent and also the sheer number of people who are tuning in right now, it suggests a massive tide turning from where we were just a few days ago. So I'm seeing a comment that says that massive donation sum could have been used for Senate or House campaigns. So actually, when Kamala Harris, for example, will use this money, or when the DNC gets this money, they'll set up field offices, for example, across the country, and that'll have major down ballot impact. So it's not like it's just going to be vote for Kamala Harris and nobody else. It's gonna there's major operations that are happening across the country in cities, all across the map, that will help not only Kamala Harris, but to ensure House races are won by Democrats, Senate races are won by Democrats, state legislative races are won by Democrats. So just because you vote for donate to one entity does not preclude you from having an impact on other races. Aha, okay, here's an interesting question. Does the RNC dropping 2 impeachment articles on Harris hold any weight? So let's talk about that. I actually just did an episode of Democracy Watch with Mark Elias, who's the nation's premier voting rights attorney, and I believe it came out about 2 hours ago. And we discussed this exact issue of whether there's going to be any weight to the fact that Republicans have now introduced 2 articles of impeachment against Kamala Harris. One was basically a reissuing of an article from 2023 about the border, of course, blaming the whole thing on Kamala Harris. And the other one is a new article that blames her for purportedly hiding the cognitive condition of President Biden. There is about 1 billion miles between these jokes of articles of impeachment and any actual high crimes and misdemeanors. So long answer short, there is no there. Not in a million years is Kamala Harris's impeachment going to go forward, just like Joe Biden's impeachment didn't go forward. This is just because Republicans exist in Congress to do one thing, and that is to try to garner attention for themselves. And so I think that their focus here is just introducing the articles of impeachment. It was a guy named Andy Ogles, I believe his name is, and look, his goal is to just get booked on Fox News. That's it. That at the end of the day, like, these people aren't serious people. They're not looking to do any governing. How an article of impeachment in nearly August of an election year is going to do anything is beyond me. But they could have used this time to do something to help jobs, or lower healthcare costs, or make schools safer, or help workers, or raise the minimum wage, or do anything that might actually help the people who live in their states and their districts. But instead, they decided to follow a 17-month investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden's purported play-for-pay scheme, which resulted in their smoking gun witness ultimately getting indicted by the FBI for being a Russian plant. And that went immediately into now trying to impeach Kamala Harris because they've decided that the entire border is their fault, which is especially ironic for 2 reasons. The first is that just this past month, we had the lowest border crossings even between Trump and Biden's presidency. And the second is, I'm not sure if that counts with COVID as well, but in large part, Trump and Biden's presidency, this was 83,000 arrests at the border. And the second part is that we actually could have had border legislation. It was negotiated by a group of 3 senators, Kyrsten Sinema, Chris Murphy, and conservative Republican James Lankford. And Donald Trump issued his clarion call to his party saying, you better not solve the issues at the border because I want to be able to run on this during the campaign. And that's exactly what he's doing right now. So the same people who said that you cannot fix the problems at the border because we would rather preserve it as a campaign issue are then turning around and what do? Introduce articles of impeachment to blame Kamala Harris for the border. I mean, it would be the fact that they could do this with a straight face and their supporters not feel completely insulted that the Republicans treat them as stupid as they do when they've already come out and said in broad daylight why they are not fixing the border is because they want it to be a campaign issue, and then they come out during the campaign and make it an issue. I mean, talk about treating your supporters like they're dumb. I say this in my videos, but, Republicans claim they hate the Democrats. There is nobody they hate more than their own supporters. Again, for those joining right now, we are not that far away from President Biden beginning his Oval Office address. We are about 15 minutes away. So if you're tuning in now, don't go anywhere because we are just a few minutes out and we can expect, a big address here. There has only been 4 instances in Biden's presidency where he has made an Oval Office address. One was just a few weeks back when, in the immediate aftermath of the Trump shooting. And I believe one had something to do with the Israel-Gaza war, and there was one prior to that, but here we are at this one. So he does reserve these Oval Office addresses for big moments. I'm not sure what he's going to talk about. Obviously, him dropping out of the race is a major news story here, so I expect that we'll have some degree of information about that as well. So here's a question I'm getting. At what point can we blame voters? No matter what Democrat we poll, the race is tied with a fascist. That leads me to believe that it's not our bad candidate, it's voters loving the fascism. So here's the thing. The difference, for example, in the country from now to 1974, when Nixon, dealt with Watergate and he was forced out, is there was no Fox News. At that moment, Roger Ailes, who created Fox, would come forward and he put forward the Ailes memo, as we call it, that would ultimately, fix the problem of there being no media apparatus to rally behind a Republican president. It would turn into what Fox is today and ensure that what happened to Richard Nixon would never happen again. The fact that we now have a media apparatus in this country that exists not to convey the news accurately, but rather just to protect Republicans at all costs. And when I say at all costs, that includes $787 million just because they decided to act in blind deference to Donald Trump, to lie on his behalf, to pretend that there was fraud in the election when there wasn't, to blame it on Dominion voting systems. There's another lawsuit pending with Smartmatic. I'm sure we'll see a settlement on that as well, into the hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. If my memory serves me correctly, the Smartmatic lawsuit is actually for more money than the Dominion voting systems lawsuit is for. But in any case, these media outlets exist solely to ensure that Republicans take power and remain in power. That's it. And if people watch this stuff, you can't necessarily blame them when they're being fed disinformation, being fed propaganda, being fed misinformation that they don't know that it's fake. And the problem is, so much of the right-wing media ecosystem is just this hermetically sealed bubble, and you can't even get out of it for long enough to recognize that you are being lied to. And I think, people ask me, for example, all the time, they're like, are you going to run for office? And I say no across the board because I recognize how important fighting the war in the media actually is, because we haven't been able to compete for a long time with what the right has done. From AM radio in the days of Rush Limbaugh to the behemoth that is Fox News, it's the biggest cable channel in the entire country, to now the way that there's disproportionately right-wing content on basically all the platforms. I mean, Facebook no question. TikTok, absolutely. YouTube, without a shadow of a doubt. The reason I started my channel is because I would log on to Facebook. This was back in 2018 when Facebook was the principal video platform. And all of the content I was being served was right-wing content. There was no left-wing content for me to get served. That's why I started doing it. And I just did it, and the videos were terrible, but it was just important to like get out there and try to like fight back against this deluge of right-wing content. And so I don't necessarily blame the voters. The onus is really on us to make sure that we are doing our part to educate people. And that means like, I do this, I talk to everybody here, but that's not the end of the line. It can't be the end of the line. I'm giving you all information that you can then use kind of as tribunes to go to your circles of people. And when you hear somebody say that, the Democrats are responsible for the border, ask them, why did Donald Trump tell the Republicans not to pass the border bill? It was a conservative border bill. It was negotiated by James Lankford. He's no liberal. He's a conservative Republican from Oklahoma. Why, there was no poison pills in the bill. Usually Democrats say, okay, we want comprehensive immigration reform, and in exchange for that, we'll give you border security. There was no comprehensive immigration reform. There was just border security. That's it. It was a complete capitulation by Democrats in deference to fixing what was happening at the border. And yet Republicans didn't want it because they wanted to preserve the issue as a campaign issue. And that is their principal issue right now. So we have to be able to point to this stuff when people in our real lives who aren't political freaks, who aren't paying attention to C-SPAN and the news day in and day out, when they say this kind of stuff. And that's part of the job of everybody, is just making sure that we're doing our part, that it's not just on the politicians. It's not just on, the lawyers and the prosecutors and the judges in courts. It's not just on people like me who have dedicated my life to growing the progressive media ecosystem. It's really on everybody. And it doesn't mean that you have to do everything, but if you can reach out to one or two people and make sure that they vote, people who wouldn't otherwise have voted, then that can have a massive ripple effect. I've used this stat before, but if you look at Wisconsin in 2020, if you had flipped just 2 votes per precinct in Wisconsin, that would have meant the state would have flipped from a Biden state to a Trump state. That's how close it was. 2 votes per precinct. So, the people, there's 25,000 people watching this live right now. Plenty more are going to watch this by the time it's posted. We'll probably get into the 500,000 range. But when people actually have the opportunity to go out to their circles of people, if everybody here was able to reach 1 or 2 people, that's enough people to have a massive impact, just the people watching this live stream alone. So all of which is to say, that's why I think progressive media is like the most important front of this right now. It's why I won't ever run for office. But I do think that's why it's going to be especially difficult to win any election given the barriers that we're facing right now. Am I getting better sleep now that Harris is the de facto nominee? Yeah. I'll tell you what, I did a video in the immediate aftermath of the Trump shooting, and it was grim. Everything that seemed to come his way would fall in his favor. We had just come off the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, which put into doubt all of the prosecutions against him. Then we have Judge Cannon dismissing the case outright against him. Then we have Joe Biden's disastrous debate and a lot of people losing faith in that whole system. And then on top of all of it, I felt like only Donald Trump could survive an assassination attempt and come out of it completely invigorated. And it really did feel like we were just sleepwalking toward totalitarianism. So, now, with everything that's happened so quickly, again, Democrats are enthused to a degree that I've literally never seen before. I was just saying before, about 10 minutes ago, that the last 3 days have been the most viewed days on my channel in its history. Each day more than the last. And again, that is a testament to the fact that Democrats are completely amped up. I think that they were just waiting for something to give, waiting for the dam to break. And then when we had Kamala, when we're able to see the extent to which she's able to prosecute the case against Donald Trump, it just completely turned the tide. And actually, the big win that was Trump naming J.D. Vance, which seemed to be him rubbing it in the faces of the Democrats, because this was somebody, this was, and I said this at the top of the stream here, but Trump was so cocky that he chose J.D. Vance. He didn't choose a moderate. He didn't choose somebody from a swing state. He didn't choose a woman or somebody of a different religion or a different race to give some permission structure to voters who may not just be white, working class, Christian, male voters. He was like, screw it. Let's just double down on the Trump. I don't even need that. I don't even need to bother expanding my coalition. I just want J.D. Vance because he's a carbon copy of me. Well, now even that looks like a backfire, because not only is Kamala a totally different animal than Joe Biden was in terms of being able to campaign against him, but now Kamala has the opportunity to name a great VP candidate from a great list of different options, and that will confer even more electoral benefits. So with that said, I'm going to take this opportunity right now to whittle down the poll one last time. As of right now, where it stands with 20,000 votes, Pete Buttigieg with 47%, Mark Kelly with 31%, and Josh Shapiro with 22%. So let's do one final poll, and it's going to be between Pete Buttigieg, final poll, VP pick, and it's going to be between Pete Buttigieg and Mark Kelly. So if you haven't yet voted, let's make sure to head over to the poll in the comments section of this video. That's just for those who are watching live. So if you're watching a little later, you won't see the poll, but I'll read out the results regardless. And the reason I'm doing that is it's basically a ranked choice voting system. So each time the lowest accumulator of votes will get knocked out, and we'll just continue to whittle it down. So right now, the final selection is between Pete and Mark Kelly. Some YouTube channels are pushing Tim Walz. I don't really know much about Tim Walz, so I can't speak on what he would be like. What are your thoughts on Project 2025 and its validity legally? So a lot of elements of Project 2025 would be illegal. The problem is that if the government is staffed with people who don't want to enforce any action against illegal actions on the government, then that's it. Like, a lot of these laws are only as valid as our own government's willingness to enforce them. And so if you have a law that isn't being enforced, then it just kind of de facto dies. I've spoken about this on previous streams, and I'll take 60 seconds right now, maybe 90 seconds, to explain the single most chilling aspect of Project 2025. If you've heard this before, listen to it again, because the more you hear about this, the more you'll be able to bring this to your circles of people, and that's going to be especially important because this is something that gets no coverage on the media, and that is Schedule F. So basically, when a president takes office right now, there are about 4,000 political appointees. They can replace them with other political appointees. It's totally normal. You want people in your administration, in the political aspects of your administration, who carry out the same who carry the same agenda beliefs as you do. The rest of the government is not political appointees. They're career civil servants. What Schedule F would do is reclassify hundreds of thousands of career civil servants as political appointees, meaning a president could come in and blanket fire them all and replace them with political acolytes, with sycophants. But think about how that would bear itself out with, for example, people who start to work at the DOJ or the FBI or the IRS or the FCC. All of a sudden, if you have people at the DOJ and these prosecutors who, when you hear Stephen Miller come forward and say there was fraud in Philadelphia, there's fraud in Detroit, there's fraud in Milwaukee, and in the last administration, they're like, there was no fraud. The DOJ is staffed by career prosecutors. We're not gonna screw around with this. Even Bill Barr said it was bullshit. You have people who aren't gonna believe, this nonsense. But all of a sudden, imagine that it's not career civil servants. Imagine it's not actual prosecutors with prosecutorial experience who've been at the DOJ for 30 years across Democratic and Republican administrations. Imagine it's just people like Stephen Miller or Kash Patel or Jeffrey Clark. And all of a sudden they say, you know what? We think there was fraud in Detroit. And so we have to throw out the votes from Detroit, from this voting location. Imagine there was fraud in Philadelphia. We should throw out the votes in Philly. What happens to a state like Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan if all of a sudden you throw out votes or votes become at risk in all of the major population centers? That means Democrats can't win in those states. And how do you win an election moving forward if all of a sudden you have the DOJ staff with people who are going to validate the most extreme claims made by Republicans? You can't. And so this isn't just the doorstep to autocracy. This isn't just the path to autocracy. This would be, in one fell swoop, autocracy. And so that's the scariest part for me is the Schedule F implications of Project 2025 and consolidating power in the executive branch. And it's something I've been beating the drum on over and over and over because, look, even if you've soured on Joe Biden or Kamala Harris and you're like, you know what, I'm not going to vote for them. I'll vote if there's somebody who's better next time, somebody who really inflames passion in me next time. But this one, I'm just going to sit out. There won't be a next time for you to be able to do that. Let's say you want somebody more progressive, for example. How do you get somebody more progressive if all of a sudden you have a DOJ that's going to validate the most extreme voter fraud cases in all of the Democratic population centers? You won't have that opportunity. So that's why it is so important right now, regardless of any faults that you see, the imperfections that you see with the Democrats from the top of the ticket all the way down, this is existential for democracy. So if your issue is climate, if your issue is healthcare, if your issue is reproductive rights, workers' rights, unions, for example, all of these depend on having a functioning democracy. So look, it's like the domino meme, right? If Schedule F passes, the natural conclusion of that is that we may very well not have free and fair elections moving forward. So I say this not to scare you or leave you despairing. I say this to motivate you because we have the opportunity now to make sure that this doesn't happen. So, my goal for saying this right now would be, I hope everybody walks away from this thinking, okay, do I have one or two people in my life who live in a swing state or a swing district, for example? Even me here in California, deep blue California, there are districts nearby where Republicans are in control. And I have enough districts around me where if we just flip a few, that may very well mean that control of the House goes from Mike Johnson, who is just this Christo-fascist fever dream, over to Hakeem Jeffries. I could do that living in Los Angeles. I still have that opportunity to do that. So I know for people watching right now, if you live in, one of the, I believe there's 19 House districts where a Republican won, but it's a Biden won House district. If you live in one of those districts, if you live in another swing seat, if you live in a state like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, even Montana, Ohio, these are all going to be super important states. You have the opportunity to donate to states. You have the opportunity to donate to the DNC so they can open up field offices in swing states. There's a lot that we can do. We have a lot of agency here. So I don't want to make anybody, the last thing I want to do is make you feel despairing or anything like that, because we actually can do a lot and we still have the opportunity to do that. And luckily now we have someone in Kamala Harris who can very effectively prosecute this case against Donald Trump. So all of which kind of leads itself into this new invigorated spirit that Democrats have right now. So we are just moments away from this beginning, and I expect any second now. So with that said, for those watching, if you are not yet subscribed to my channel and you want to support my live streams, the best way to do that is just, there's two ways, and I apologize for people who've heard this before. Two ways. One is to subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything to do that, but it's a great way to stay on top of these live streams. And the other is that I do have a new book coming out. It's called Shameless, and it talks about, a lot of what I've spoken about here, about the Ailes memo and the origin of Fox News, for example, and how Newt Gingrich and Roger Ailes have got us to the point we're at today. So the foreword is written by Jamie Raskin, and it includes interviews with Pete Buttigieg, Heather Cox Richardson, Mark Elias, Al Franken, Dan Pfeiffer, Jen Psaki.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. In this sacred space, I'm surrounded by portraits of extraordinary American presidents. Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington, who showed us presidents are not kings. Abraham Lincoln, who implored us to reject malice. Franklin Roosevelt, who inspired us to reject fear. I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think is more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that. And I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people. And I know this: we are a great nation because we are good people. When you elected me to this office, I promised to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country, is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. But there's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism. Make it clear there is no place in America for political violence or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence, our planet from climate crisis that is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. And I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I will keep working to ensure America remains strong and secure and the leader of the free world. I'm the first president in this century to report to the American people that the United States is not at war anywhere in the world. We'll keep rallying a coalition of proud nations to stop Putin from taking over Ukraine and doing more damage. We'll keep NATO stronger, and I'll make it more powerful and more united than any time in all of our history. I'll keep doing the same for our allies in the Pacific. You know, when I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. That's not the case anymore. And I'm going to keep working to end the war in Gaza, bring home all the hostages, and bring peace and security to the Middle East and end this war. We're also working around the clock to bring home Americans being unjustly detained all around the world. You know, we've come so far since my inauguration. On that day, I told you, as I stood in that winter, we stood in a winter of peril and a winter of possibilities. Peril and possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in the century. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. But we came together as Americans, and we got through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Today we have the strongest economy in the world, creating nearly 16 million new jobs, a record. Wages are up. Inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're literally rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. Manufacturing has come back to America. We're leading the world again in chips and science and innovation. We finally beat Big Pharma after all these years to lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure we lower the cost for everyone, not just seniors. More people have health care today in America than ever before. And I signed one of the most significant laws helping millions of veterans and their families who were exposed to toxic materials. You know, the most significant climate law ever in the history of the world. The first major gun safety law in 30 years. And today, the violent crime rate is at a 50-year low. We're also securing our border. Border crossings are lower today than when the previous administration left office. I've kept my commitment to appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I also kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and be a president for all Americans. That's what I've done. I ran for president 4 years ago because I believed and still do that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake. And that's still the case. America's an idea. An idea stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It's the most powerful idea in the history of the world. That idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We've never fully lived up to it, to this sacred idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I do not believe the American people will walk away from it now. In just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I would like to thank our great Vice President Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. Now the choice is up to you, the American people. When you make that choice, remember the words of Benjamin Franklin that's hanging on my wall here in the Oval Office, alongside the busts of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez. When Ben Franklin was asked, as he emerged from the convention going on, whether the founders have given America a monarchy or republic, Franklin's response was, a republic, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it. Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. That's what's so special about America. We're a nation of promise and possibilities, of dreamers and doers, of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I've given my heart and my soul to our nation, like so many others. I've been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. We just have to keep faith, keep the faith, and remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's simply nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's act together, preserve our democracy. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Okay, so that was President Biden's Oval Office address. There was a small part of me when he started speaking that I actually thought, I was like, is he gonna drop out right now? But clearly not doing that. You know, he made it clear he will be doing his let's go full on me here. He will be carrying out his duties for the rest of his term, also not lending credence to this Republican talking point where, oh, if he can't run for 4 more years, then how could he possibly continue to serve out his term right now, which is, of course, complete nonsense, a complete straw man. Knowing that you can't serve out 4 more years is not the same as a concession that you can't do another few months. There's a big difference between how old Biden is right now versus how old he'll be 4 years from now. And recognizing that you can't do this up to your 86th birthday is not the same as being able to do it until mid-January. So just, you know, for anybody who says that to you is like, oh, well, Biden needs to drop out if he can't run for re-election. First of all, 2 totally different things. And second of all, not anybody's choice but his, and he just made his decision right there. So at that point, you know, they're just kind of peeing into the wind at this point. So with that said, made his case, largely a case for democracy right there. And I think that's especially important because the media will write off the issue of democracy because it's not like the economy. And the media has decided that even as we're at the doorstep of fascism, that nobody gives a shit, and that the only issue the American people could possibly care about is the economy. Obviously, that's not true. The issue of democracy was one of the top issues as we headed into the previous election, and that showed in all of the exit polls from voters who came out and said, no, it's not just taxes. That's not the only thing people care about. It is in large part threats to democracy. And that is why when you have these people who espouse the America First agenda like they did in 2022, and I'm talking about Carrie Lake, Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker, Don Bolduc, Doug Mastriano, all of those people lost. They lost their elections because voters recognized they posed a threat to democracy. When you had, in state after state, when you have these extreme candidates who threaten democracy, even when they lose and other Republicans win, that shows voters, that shows the states, that shows these officials in the Republican Party that it is the extremism that even Republican voters are rejecting. That's why we have groups, for example, like the Bulwark, Republican Voters Against Trump, the Lincoln Project. There's no groups of disaffected Democrats because Democrats pose some grave danger to democracy. It is just in one direction. It's just, you know, these moderate, these pro-democracy Republicans who recognize the threat that Republicans face to their party. And that is in large part the issue that Joe Biden was speaking about here. And what it was basically just a nod to what this election is going to be about. You know, it's not, oh, is the tax rate going to be raised? Are we going to have Medicare for all? Those issues are not what this election is about. He was making it perfectly clear that this election is a referendum on our ability to keep democracy. When you have somebody like Donald Trump who has promised to be a dictator for a day, because as we all know, dictators famously relinquish power once they get it, who has vowed to terminate the Constitution, who said that he wants to do mass deportations, who has promised to send the military into democratic cities. This is, in large part, what I was speaking about before. This is what fascism looks like. And so that's what's at stake in this election. And you can add stuff to that, of course. You can add reproductive rights. You can add gun safety. You can add healthcare. You can add combating climate change. All of those are of course, major issues, but they're dependent upon our ability to preserve our democracy, because without a democracy at the base of all of this, we don't have any say in how any of those things become adjudicated, basically. So, you know, good on him for taking the opportunity to do a rare Oval Office speech. And again, this was the 4th one of his presidency, so it's not like these things happen all the time. For him to use his bully pulpit right here to make sure that people know, what the principal issue in this election is going to be. And by the way, regardless of what the media might tell you, it is not the economy. It is the threats to democracy and what can happen to this country if Christo-fascists take power. So good on him for making sure the principal point in this election is clear. And more importantly, basically telling the American people that Kamala is going to be able to pick up the torch and lead this fight against Donald Trump. There are still, we cannot underestimate the extent to which a lot of people don't pay attention to politics. And so using every opportunity we can to remind people what's at stake and who the players are. I'm certain there's people out there who still think that Biden's running against Trump. So good on him for using this opportunity to take an Oval Office speech, speak directly to the entire nation, and let people know that he is passing the torch to Kamala Harris, and here's who she is, and get to know her, and she's going to be the one fighting to defend democracy against this threat to democracy. There's a reason that even when I do my videos, I repeat stuff a lot. And that is because for as disdainful as we are of build the wall, make America great again, lock her up, the reason that Donald Trump's mottos are so pervasive is because he repeats them so damn much. We hear them every day to the point where it becomes second nature. So when I do my videos, for example, and I say, what have Democrats accomplished? I know that a lot of people watching right now who watch my videos regularly can say the American Rescue Plan, Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, PACT Act, gun safety law, infrastructure law, and then Violence Against Women Act, codifying marriage equality into federal law, 16 million jobs, record high stock market, inflation is down to its 3% target, wages are outpacing inflation, and unemployment is at its lowest point in 50 years. I repeat this stuff over and over and over because the more I repeat it, the more it becomes second nature, and you all can repeat it to your circles of people. So good on him, good on Biden for using this opportunity to hammer away at this idea of what's at stake in our democracy. I mean, he doesn't use that quote, a republic if you can keep it, if it wasn't absolutely pertinent to this moment. So I think that it's especially important not just for him to be doing that, but for us to be tuning in. That's why I'll host these live streams in the future. So for those watching right now, if you want to be able to stay on top of, more speeches made by Joe Biden, more speeches made by Kamala Harris, and even speeches made by Donald Trump so that we can sit here in real time, fact check them, and make sure that he doesn't get away with spewing his bullshit, misinformation, and disinformation, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything to do so. Again, for those watching, if you want to also support my work, I have a book coming out called Shameless. I pinned the link to order it in the comments section of this video, or you can just go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or bookshop.org and type in Shameless by Brian Tyler Cohen. That's a great way to support what I do. So if you want to support this live stream, that's the best way to do that. Okay, with that said, I will take the opportunity now to point to the poll that we had. So since for probably the last 30 minutes, I've been hosting a poll that was basically a ranked choice voting poll where we had initially started with a lot of Democratic candidates. We whittled it down to the highest vote getters, which are Pete Buttigieg and Mark Kelly. It looks like the top vote getter in every single poll was once again Pete Buttigieg, 53-47. So the audience is definitely split. With that said, so I'll end this poll right now, 53-47. Pete Buttigieg has won the poll. With that said, we will get an answer between tomorrow and August 7th. Remember, there is a virtual convention that's happening to be able to comport with some deadline, an earlier deadline that we have to abide by, thanks to some screwing around by Republicans in Ohio. So that virtual deadline will happen, and prior to that happening, Kamala Harris will take the opportunity to name her VP. I wouldn't recommend that she do it right now because Democrats don't need anything right now to be able to garner attention and enthusiasm, so we should ride this wave as long as we can, and then when things start to tamp down a little bit, then we can, use a VP pick, for example, to bring the attention back onto the party, and then that person will get something of a honeymoon period where the entire country needs to learn about them. J.D. Vance, for example, in his honeymoon period, we basically found out that his website said that he wanted to ban abortion. Yesterday, he tried to make a joke, or 2 days ago, I believe it was, he tried to make a joke about Mountain Dew, and even watching it, I was hoping that the earth would open up and swallow me whole because that shit was cringy. So yeah, when it comes to J.D. Vance trying to do comedy, I would say, I never thought I would say this, but maybe leave the low-rent conservative comedy to Greg Gutfeld and Mike Huckabee. And when I'm saying that leave the comedy to Greg Gutfeld and Mike Huckabee, if that is not a testament to the extent to which J.D. Vance is aggressively unfunny, nothing is. Okay, if you want to throw questions into the chat, I will do my best to answer some questions. Here's one. I heard today that someone said Trump is looking to drop J.D. Vance from the ticket and pick someone else. Since the GOP already had their convention, can he still do that? No. This is final. So, the irony of all of this is Republicans have spent so long wailing against the prospect of Joe Biden serving another term. They say he's too old, he's in the throes of cognitive decline, he can't do it anymore, how dare you? And so when Joe Biden acquiesced to their demands and decided to step down for the good of the country, all of a sudden, these Republicans are like, we're going to sue you. How dare you? How dare you step down? How dare you do the thing that we've been demanding that you do for years and years and years? You need to stay in. We need you in this race. And it just betrays like their utter lack of consistency. I know that's a shocker. There's gambling in this casino, but so what they didn't take into account is that even after Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance, which was a terrible choice, Kamala Harris still had the opportunity to step up if Joe Biden stepped down, and it is before our convention. So our convention doesn't happen until August 19th, so we still have the opportunity to do so, and we did, and now they're protesting the exact thing that they were demanding that we do, which goes to show it's not about Joe Biden, it's just about their own relentless pursuit of power. They don't care about, none of these things are actually principled stands. If it was, then they would say, good, we didn't want him to be on the ballot because we didn't think he was up to the job. So it's not about that, it is just the fact that they want to be able to be able to wield power for themselves, and they wanted him on the ballot because they thought he was the weaker candidate. And the polling actually does bear that out, because suddenly states that were out of reach for Joe Biden are immediately back on the map for Kamala Harris, and that's before we even know who her VP pick is. And if, for example, she picks Mark Kelly, that puts states like Arizona immediately even more into play than they might already have been. It'll put a state like Pennsylvania into play if she picks Josh Shapiro. There are a number of states just like that. I'm getting the question, is it possible that Jamie Raskin isn't being considered for VP because of his role in the January 6th committee? I don't think that it's necessarily. I haven't heard anything about Jamie Raskin being considered for VP either. Obviously, if there's any human being that in the world that I have, undying respect for, Jamie Raskin is probably number one on that list. Jamie Raskin is as far as politics goes, he is my hero. So I would love to see Jamie in any position of power, but I haven't heard his name in the VP conversation. I don't know if it's because he's happy with his position in the House, for example. I'm not sure. I know that he decided to forego running for the Senate because he is a chairman in the House. He's chair of the Oversight Committee in the House, and that is a powerful position. And he's also necessary to be there to push back against people like James Comer and Jim Jordan and, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the party. James Comer was obviously responsible for this completely botched impeachment effort against Joe Biden. Without Jamie there, without Congressman Raskin there, who knows what Comer would have been able to get away with saying. So much of these committee hearings were just disinformation being swatted down immediately by people like Jamie Raskin and Jasmine Crockett and AOC and Jared Moskowitz and Dan Goldman. So good on those people. I mean, it is necessary. It's a sad commentary on politics today that we need people in office, if for nothing else, than to just bat back the deluge of disinformation being propped up by the right. But that is the unfortunate reality we live in. And so knowing that that's our reality, we do need people in these positions of power to be able to neutralize the James Comers and Jim Jordans and Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Lauren Boeberts of the world. And that's exactly what Jamie Raskin has the opportunity to do in the House. So I don't know what the deal is in terms of, the actual shortlist, because I haven't seen his name floating around. But we also don't know how accurate that shortlist actually is. We don't know the extent to which, that is everybody or even anybody. I mean, this is just basically taking the word of sources speaking to reporters. And I'm sure that there are also people who are being vetted right now who aren't even on that list. One of them may very well be Jamie Raskin. I'm not sure. But in any case, look, if Jamie ever had the option to be VP, it would It would be a good day in this country to see smart, effective, decent people like that be able to be elevated into positions of power, which is not to say that any of the people on that list right now are not also smart, decent, and eloquent, charismatic, talented people, because all of them absolutely are. Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, Pete Buttigieg, the list goes on and on. So we have good things awaiting us when we finally do get a decision on who the Supreme Court justice is going to be. I wish Jasmine, I'm getting a comment right now, I wish Jasmine Crockett would be nominated for Harris's VP. 2 black women in the White House would be an unstoppable force. Jasmine Crockett is a superstar, an absolute superstar. Do I think Mark Kelly would be more digestible by moderates? Perhaps. I don't always know that going the moderate route is the right route. I mean, you look at somebody like Barack Obama. I don't know that he was more palatable to moderates, for example, but he inflamed passion. He got people excited about coming out to vote. He reached a new generation of people. He was rhetorically brilliant. I think in large part, it's not just how boring of a white guy can we get. I think it's how who's going to elicit the most enthusiasm and passion from voters. And I think that that's the way we should be thinking about this. I don't know that like the Hillary Clinton, Tim Kaine, America's dad model is necessarily it. I think it's who's going to get people excited to vote. Look, I get excited when I saw Kamala Harris's speech in Wisconsin because she kicked ass. I don't care what she looks like. I don't care what gender she is. I don't care what race she is. I don't care, about any of that stuff. I just want somebody who's going to get me excited about politics. That's what she was able to do. Obviously, it's a consideration because not everybody in this country is going to be forgiving when it comes to race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation. But I think in large part, I don't want to overstate the importance of like how pasty white, America's dad New Balance sneakers can we get, which is nothing against America's dad New Balance sneakers, but I don't know that that's going to be really, the top qualification is what I'm trying to say. Here's an interesting question. I wanted to ask if you think the timing of Biden dropping out after Trump announced Vance's VP was tactical so that he was stuck with Vance. I don't know. My gut tells me no. Here's why. I think it might have just been I think it might have just been fortuitous that it happened that way. It is a historic, unprecedented decision to step down. I know there's some historical analogous situation with LBJ, but heading toward re-election as an incumbent to step down is still historic in this country. We only had a few weeks between the disaster that was that debate and Biden's decision to not run for re-election. I believe it was just about 3 weeks. So nobody could have expected Biden to do poorly at the debate. Obviously, his campaign wouldn't have demanded a debate in June if they thought he was going to shit the bed. So, any Republicans who say that they knew that this was going to happen, why would Biden's own campaign want to send Biden out to fail in front of 60 million people? It doesn't make any sense. So nobody expected this to happen, even if they claim that they did. And so, between the time that happened and the pressure ramping up, at first we weren't sure. At second, there became a lot of media figures, a lot of polling that would come out that forced lawmakers to get on record and say, we don't have any confidence. And that built to a fever pitch, basically. And I think only about 3 weeks went by between the time that the debate happened and too many people came forward telling him to drop out. That was exacerbated by the fact that Biden got COVID, which I think didn't help things at all because he was even more diminished. And so I think it was just luck. Dumb luck, basically, that it happened after the Republican convention, but before the Democratic convention, that all of these bad things happened at once, the debate and COVID and the pressure from all of these lawmakers based on internal polls. And I think it just so worked out that way that Biden chose to drop out, completely separate and apart from the fact that Donald Trump had already chosen J.D. Vance, and it was just like a dumb luck thing. And but no, I don't think that there was any nefarious intent. I think it was just, a matter of timing, and it just kind of worked out that way. Do I think Biden will expand the Supreme Court before his term ends? So I don't think Biden has the opportunity to do that unilaterally. I think that will need to be legislation in Congress. Obviously, nothing will be able to move out of Congress while the filibuster is still intact, because we just have, a very slim majority in the Senate and we have no majority in the House. So I wouldn't expect any Supreme Court expansion stuff, but hopefully Biden will use the bully pulpit of the presidency to advocate for something with regard to the Supreme Court, whether it's stronger enforcement of the ethics, the new ethics rules that were handed down, or even just advocating for either terms or an expanded court, just using his bully pulpit to normalize that among Americans. Joe Biden's superpower is making progressive ideas seem moderate, just by virtue of the fact that it's Joe Biden who says them. When we look at Joe Biden, we don't see Bernie Sanders. This is a 50-year centrist Democrat. Joe Biden, for as much as they try to call him a radical, Marxist, communist, leftist, it's Joe Biden. He is viewed largely around the entire country as a centrist Democrat. With that said, he's governed in a more progressive manner than any other president in our lifetimes. But the reason that he was able to pass a lot of what he was able to pass and get this stuff done is precisely because it's Joe Biden selling it to his Republican counterparts or to the American people, and so it makes things seem less scary because it's Biden doing it. If you have Bernie Sanders or AOC pushing the same stuff, it's way more easy to vilify it as being some, Marxist woke agenda being pushed to usher in socialism. Joe Biden isn't that guy. You can't land those attacks. And so when Biden brings forward the Inflation Reduction Act provision to negotiate lower drug prices, that'll get passed. And you can get Joe Manchin on board, which is what we needed. When Biden brings forward a gun safety bill that gets negotiated by both parties, he's able to do that because it's Biden doing it. It's not some far left, firebrand who can immediately get shut down by Republicans. That is his superpower. It is the veneer of Joe Biden in his decades of being a centrist Democrat, pushing progressive policy and making it seem more moderate, more palatable, when it is anything but. It is progressive and good and will help a shit ton of people in this country. You cannot deny the impacts that finally allowing the government to negotiate lower drug prices for the first time in this country's history, like the rest of the world does, that is huge. You can't deny the impacts of the biggest investment in climate change. That wouldn't have happened without him, without somebody with a moderate veneer pushing it. So, that is, I think he deserves a ton of credit, because it would have been easy for him to get into office and just say, let's just do me. I've been a moderate Democrat my whole life. Let's just go right down the middle. But he didn't do that. We have upgraded infrastructure in this country for the first time. We have marriage equality codified into federal law for same-sex couples. We have the CHIPS Act, which created a boom in American clean energy manufacturing in this country, added 800,000 jobs. All of this stuff is huge, and it wouldn't have passed without someone like Joe Biden pushing it. So in a way, if we'd had somebody like Bernie Sanders as president, I don't know that he would have been as successful or as progressive a president as Joe Biden, because there are things that Joe Biden can do that Bernie Sanders can't do, because the messenger here is somebody who is a lot more moderate and palatable for these Republicans who otherwise would have run in the other direction if they were to be seen negotiating with somebody scary like Bernie Sanders, And of course, I'm saying this sarcastically because I think Bernie Sanders is amazing. And a lot of the ideas that Biden pushed forward were in large part because he did get that cooperation with the progressive wing of the party and worked very closely with Bernie Sanders, to the point that Bernie Sanders didn't even want Joe Biden to drop out. Here's an interesting question. Do I think that Taylor Swift will be formally endorsing Harris? Here's what my gut tells me. My gut tells me yes. I don't know what that's worth. You know, that and $5 will get you, well, that and $10 will get you a Subway at a foot long at Subway. But I do think in my heart of hearts, in my gut, that Taylor Swift won't sit this one out. It's not like we don't know her political orientation already, and she has the opportunity to do something amazing by posting a vote.org link, or for her millions of fans, young people who may very well be apathetic toward politics, to get involved. So much of what I do is like sitting here and asking you all to get one or two people in your lives involved. Someone like Taylor Swift, who immediately has the ear of tens, hundreds of millions of young people who may not be interested in politics at all. That could very well be the difference between a win and a loss in a state like Wisconsin or Georgia or Arizona or Nevada or Michigan or Pennsylvania. I mean, like, it may very well be the difference between fascism and democracy. So do I think that she should? Without a shadow of a doubt. And I think history will remember her, if she does, for doing exactly that. Do I think she will? I do. I absolutely do. I think she knows the stakes of this election, and I don't think she's going to squander her opportunity to have an impact. Here's another comment I'm getting. What I find funny now is Trump is older. He's getting karma. He was saying the same thing that when Joe was running. So that's exactly right. Now, I mean, Republicans had basically predicated their entire re-election campaign against Joe Biden on the fact that we can't have an old guy as president. Well, you know, you're the ones running the old guy as president right now. Kamala Harris is not nearly as old as Donald Trump. Donald Trump will be 83 when he would leave office. So, a lot of what Republicans said, you can use their words against them. Not that hypocrisy has ever stopped them before, but this is a good opportunity to be able to say, look, it wasn't us that was saying an old guy can't be president. It was you. And if you want to talk about age, let's talk about age. I'm reading that Olivia Rodrigo just endorsed Harris. That is awesome. Although I believe that Olivia Rodrigo is a little bit more politically active than Taylor Swift. So less surprising than Tayller Swift. And obviously, look, Taylor Swift is the biggest star in the world, I would say. The biggest musical artist on the planet. So really, she's the ultimate prize. There's nobody bigger than her. Do I think more actors across our country will come out and support Kamala? I do. I think that, Biden came into this election with a lot of baggage. And by virtue of him stepping down, it gives Kamala the opportunity to relinquish all of that baggage and get people energized again, not just by virtue of the fact that she's not Joe Biden, but also because she's younger and she's cool and she's like got the whole, connection to the pop culture world, and that's something that Biden didn't have. I mean, Charlie XCX came out within minutes of Harris announcing her candidacy and basically said, that she'd endorse her. I mean, she said Kamala is Brat, and I did have to ask what that meant, and I found out that it's Brat Summer. Not entirely sure what that means still, but I've been told by reputable sources that it is indeed an endorsement. I think I just got the question, do I think Hillary can be VP? No, I don't. I think that we have to let that one go. That is, we'll leave that one sit where it belongs, which is just as a Fox News fever dream. They have been fear-mongering about Hillary's imminent return for my whole life, basically. Do I think the Electoral College will be looked at in earnest by the Dems if they take the House and keep the Senate? So I think what the question is asking is, will there be the opportunity for Democrats to reform the Electoral College in the event that Democrats have the majority? So we wouldn't be able to eliminate just in, the Senate and the House, eliminate the Electoral College, but there is something called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and it's up to the individual states to be able to ratify that. it will go into effect immediately once we hit 270 electoral votes. So let's see how many electoral votes it's got thus far. So far, it is at 209. So we need 61 more electoral votes worth of states to sign on to the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and then it will immediately go into effect. And then that means that instantly, once we find out who the National Popular Vote winner is, 270 electoral votes will go to that person. They will be awarded automatically, and that person will win the election. It'll be one person, one vote, how it should be in the country. So that is an option, but we still need more states to sign on to it. It's possible that we can get that in the next few years, and we should continue to advocate for it. I've done quite a few episodes on it with Mark Elias, my co-host for Democracy Watch, and I'll continue to focus on it. But that is our only hope of really getting true, fair, one-person, one-vote representation in this country, is to put the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact into effect. Okay, I'm going to do one more question here. Let's get one final question. As I wait for a final question, I will make one last request to you. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel, about half of you watching right now are not yet subscribed. So if you aren't subscribed and you want to support this stream, see other streams that I do, I'll try to host them on a more frequent basis. Please make sure to subscribe. It doesn't cost anything to do so. All you got to do is hit the subscribe button, and that's it. I don't post too much content, just a few videos a day, so you won't be hammered with too many notifications. And the second is to support the work that I do. A great way to do that right now is that I have a book coming out called Shameless, so you can pre-order it now. Pre-ordering is the best way to support me. More pre-orders mean more buzz for the media, which means, when the book actually does come out, people will actually cover the fact that I've released a book. So the foreword is written by Jamie Raskin. It includes interviews with Pete Buttigieg, Jen Psaki, Al Franken, Mark Elias, Heather Cox Richardson, and Jamie Raskin as well. So again, to support the work that I do, that is a great option. I'd really appreciate it. I pinned the link in the comment section of this video, or you can just go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or your favorite bookseller and just type in Shameless by Brian Tyler Cohen. Okay, let's do one final question here. If Pete is the VP nominee, do I think Fox will stop inviting him on? I think Fox will probably stop inviting him on because he's too effective, and that doesn't help anybody over at Fox. Fox does not exist as an earnest news outlet. They exist to perpetuate disinformation on behalf of Republicans. Pete is too effective for them to be able to do that. And so I think that Pete's requests on Fox News are few and far in between just because of that, because if the whole point of a propaganda outlet is to disseminate propaganda, and this guy makes that more difficult for them, then there is no reason to continue bringing him on. Do I think the U.S. could handle a gay VP candidate? So that's a question I've gotten quite a lot. I'm not sure. Look, my rebuttal to that, I can make the argument on both sides. One, this is an exceedingly bigoted country. And we've learned that more and more in the coming years, especially as Donald Trump has emboldened basically the worst characters in this country. The flip side is we thought this country wasn't capable of electing a black man. And not only did they do it once, they did it twice. And he was one of the most popular, effective presidents of our lifetimes with Barack Obama. So I think everything is only impossible until it isn't. It's easy to say, well, we're just too bigoted to do X, Y, Z, but at one point we were too bigoted to give women the right to vote, to give black people the right to vote. Everything is only impossible until it's not. And so, look, I have more respect for Pete than just about anyone. He is probably the most rhetorically talented candidate politician that we have in Democratic politics right now. And if he was the nominee, I mean, it would be we would be in good shape. We would be very lucky, and we would be really well served by someone like him. So with that said, we will leave it there. And again, thank you all for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed. I appreciate it. And I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.